Okay, so today we're diving into something I think everyone can relate to. Uh, Getting a better price when shopping. Who doesn't love a good deal? And we've got this really cool resource to help us out with this. It's actually an English language learning lesson, but it focuses on like all the vocabulary and phrases around bargaining.
Yeah, it's got dialogues and explanations of how to express what you're willing to pay and a bunch of examples to show how it all works in real life.
That's so cool. I mean, even if you're not learning English, I think this could be super helpful for anyone who wants to, you know, up their bargaining game.
Absolutely. So what we want to do today is really dig into this material and pull out those golden nuggets,
Yeah.
the most useful insights and techniques that we can all actually use.
I love that golden nugget. It's perfect. So it's like we're going on a treasure hunt for the best bargaining secrets. But really, what we're trying to figure out is how can we all become more effective bargainers and negotiators using the language and the strategies they lay out in these resources. So where do we even begin?
Well, the lesson starts off really grounding us in the basic concept of bargaining, right? And it's interesting because the word bargain itself can be that amazing deal you found. Like, oh my gosh, I got such a bargain on this.
Totally. Like when you find that perfect item at a ridiculously low price, that's a bargain. But then there's the other side of it, the actual process of trying to get that good price, like to bargain. I remember I used to think bargaining was, something you only did in like exotic marketplaces, not like at my local mall.
Right, and the lesson makes it clear that to bargain really is the same thing as to negotiate. It's that conversation, that back and forth you have with a seller to hopefully end up at a price that you're both comfortable with.
So it's not just about being pushy or aggressive, it's about finding that sweet spot where everyone feels like they got a good deal.
Exactly. And they actually include this dialogue where a woman's trying to bargain for some dresses in a store. It really puts you right there in the situation, doesn't it?
It totally does. Like you can almost picture the whole scene, the clothes racks, the the salesperson, everything. And right away in that first exchange, some key vocabulary pops up, stuff you really need to know if you want to talk about price,
Oh,
really.
absolutely, yeah. And the first one that they highlight is price range. So what do you think is the real value in understanding your price range before you even start bargaining?
Hmm, that's a good question. I guess like on a practical level, your price range is the lowest and the highest you're willing to spend, right? So it's about knowing your budget, but it's also about how much you value the thing you're buying.
Exactly. And I think experienced bargainers, they often even have this walkaway price in mind. It's that absolute maximum they'll pay no matter what. And having that set beforehand can help you stay grounded in the negotiation and not get swept away in the moment.
Yeah, that makes total sense. You don't want to end up paying way more than you intended just because you got caught up in the excitement of the deal.
Yeah.
And then there's shop around, which I think is just such classic advice. Why is that so important?
Shop around is all about information.
Right.
The more you know, the better you are at bargaining. It's like in the dialogue, the woman says, I think I'll shop around, meaning she wants to check other stores, compare prices. It's doing your research.
Yeah, it's like knowing your options before you commit to anything. And these days, shopping around is easier than ever, right? You can do it all online without even leaving your house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that knowledge gives you so much leverage. If you can say, hey, I saw this same thing for less at another store, that gives you some real power in the negotiation.
It's like you're armed with the facts. Then there's this word pricey, which is interesting to me. How would you say that word is different from just saying something's expensive?
Pricey feels more, I don't know, more casual, less formal. It's like instead of saying that car is prohibitively expensive, you'd say, whoa, that car is pricey.
Yeah, it's definitely a softer approach. Maybe using a word like pricey can help keep the conversation a bit lighter, less confrontational.
Totally. It's like setting a friendlier tone from the get-go. So now that we've got some of the basic vocabulary down, let's get into the actual phrases that you can use to, try and get a better price.
Okay, let's do it. Hit me with your best bargaining lines. Where do we start?
Well, I think one of the most straightforward ways to start is by simply asking, can you give me a better deal? Or can you give me a better price? It's direct, and it gets your point across.
Like it's clear, it's concise, no beating around the bush. And you see it used in the dialogue too, so you know it works in a real world situation. From your experience, do you think that directness is generally effective?
I think in many cultures where bargaining is common, that directness is appreciated, it shows you're serious, but of course the way you say it matters. You want to be polite, maybe even throw in a smile. It's not about being demanding, it's about being, respectfully inquisitive.
Yeah, it's all about the tone. You're not trying to start a fight, you're just trying to have a conversation about price. So what if they give you an offer, but it's still not quite what you were hoping for? What's the next move?
Well, the lesson suggests a phrase like, "That's still more than I wanted to spend." It's a way to express that the price is too high without shutting down the conversation.
Right. It's not just a flat out no, you're giving them a reason, letting them know where you're coming from.
Exactly. And that can sometimes encourage them to reconsider their offer. Now we get to a phrase that's a bit more, well, a bit more final, and that is, "That's my last offer."
Ooh, that sounds serious. Like you're putting your cards on the table and saying, this is it, take it or leave it. What are the risks and rewards of using a phrase like that?
It's a powerful statement, but it definitely carries some risk. If the other person isn't ready to meet your price, it could end the negotiation right there. But it can also be the thing that pushes you both to a final decision. It's about timing and about conveying that you're sincere.
I can see how that could be a good tactic if you've already gone back and forth a few times and you're getting close to that walkaway point. But yeah, using it too early could be a mistake.
Absolutely. You don't want to cut the negotiation short if there's still room for compromise. Speaking of compromise, the lesson actually provides a really detailed example of a whole negotiation playing out, which I thought was super helpful.
Yeah, it's like we get to watch a bargaining master class in action. Can you walk us through how that scenario goes?
Sure. So in this example, let's say someone wants to buy an item that's priced as $70, but their goal is to get it for $50. So they start by offering their ideal price, the 50.
Bold move, going straight for the low ball. What happens next?
The seller, of course, counters with $65, explaining that 50 is just too far below the asking price. So right away, you see both sides trying to anchor the negotiation, right?
Mm-hmm.
The buyer starts slow, hoping to bring the final price down, while the seller is emphasizing the original price to try and keep it higher.
It's like a little tug of war. They're both trying to establish their starting point, their position. So what happens after that initial volley?
The buyer doesn't give up. They come back with $58, mentioning their budget again. The seller then moves a little, down to $63, saying they're getting close to their bottom line. So they go back and forth like this, making smaller adjustments until they eventually settle on $59.
Wow, so they managed to meet somewhere in the middle. I guess persistence pays off as long as you do it respectfully. But I noticed that the seller at one point says, you drive a hard bargain. What does that tell us about how the negotiation went?
That phrase is actually a bit of a compliment. It means the buyer is a skilled negotiator, someone who knows how to get what they want. It acknowledges that they were tough but fair and that they ultimately got a good deal.
So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be told you drive a hard bargain, as long as you get it ethically and respectfully. But it wasn't just about the final price, right? There were other things thrown in to sweeten the deal.
Right. To finalize the deal at that $59, the seller offered to include a charging dock and even gave a discount on an extended warranty. It shows that there's often more to negotiate than just the base price. You can sometimes get extras or better terms or other perks.
That's such a good point. It's about looking at the whole package, not just the sticker price. And in the end, it sounds like they both walked away feeling good about it, which is really the ideal outcome.
Absolutely. A fair price is one where everyone feels like they got a reasonable deal, a win-win situation.
Okay, so we've covered a lot about the tactics and the phrases you can use, but the lesson also touches on something that's really important to remember, and that's the cultural aspect of bargaining. Because what's considered normal in one place might be totally out of place somewhere else.
It's so true. Like, imagine trying to haggle over the price of milk at your local grocery store. It's just not done in some cultures.
Exactly. And the lesson uses this really interesting example comparing Canada and Ecuador. What did you find most surprising about those two countries?
Well, it points out that in Canada, bargaining is pretty rare, even in places like markets, where you might expect it. I mean, have you ever tried to bargain for, like, fruits and vegetables at a farmer's market?
Now that you mention it, no, I've never even thought to do that. But that does seem to be the norm here.
Right, but then you contrast that with Ecuador, where the lesson explains that bargaining is super common, especially in local markets. It's almost expected in a lot of situations. It's a whole different ballgame.
Wow, that's fascinating. It really shows how important it is to be aware of local customs. What's seen as perfectly acceptable in one place could be considered rude or disrespectful in another. I remember this time I was traveling, and I tried to bargain for something at a little shop. I thought I was being all savvy, but the shopkeeper looked at me like I'd grown a second head.
Oh no. I bet that was a bit awkward.
It was. I totally misread the situation. Live and learn, right?
Yeah.
But that's why this lesson is so valuable. It helps us avoid those cultural faux pas. And it even says that in many countries, bargaining is almost like an art.
That's such a great way to put it. It's not just about being pushy, it's about understanding the nuances, the unspoken rules, the whole dance of the negotiation.
Like a delicate tango of price and persuasion. But on a lighter note, the lesson does mention our own supposed experiences with bargaining. It playfully suggests that you have a reputation for being quite the negotiator. Any truth to that?
Uh-huh. Well, let's just say I believe in getting good value for my money, and I'm not afraid to politely inquire about the possibility of a better price, especially when it's culturally appropriate. And you, on the other hand, have a pretty legendary bargaining story of your own, if I recall correctly. Care to share any details?
Oh, that one. Well, let's just say it involved a rug, a very charming vendor, and a final price that was significantly lower than the original offer. Maybe the full story is for another time, but it definitely taught me the power of polite persistence and, really knowing your market. The point is, cultural sensitivity is just as crucial as knowing the right phrases.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of phrases, the lesson wraps up with a nice little vocabulary review, reminding us of some of the key terms we talked about and throwing in a few extras that are helpful for talking about prices and shopping in general.
Yeah, like a quick refresh. We get exclusive, discount, offer, the different payment methods, cash and credit card. And it also mentions words like promotion, negotiate, and my personal favorite, freebie.
Who doesn't love a good freebie?
Seriously.
Yeah.
But I think what's really effective is that they don't just give you a list of words, they give you examples of how those words are used in sentences. Like, I got this shirt for half price, what a bargain, or this restaurant is way too pricey for me.
Yeah, hearing it in context makes it so much easier to remember and actually use those words in real life. And they even revisit those key phrases like out of my price range with more examples, just to really drive the meaning home.
It's like they're giving you a bargaining toolkit, equipping you with the language and the confidence to go out there and get the best possible deals.
Exactly. So just to sum it all up for you today, we've explored the core concept of bargaining, looked at key vocabulary, and learned some really practical phrases like, can you give me a better deal? And that's still more than I wanted to spend. We also discussed the importance of understanding the cultural context of bargaining, because what's considered normal can vary widely around the world.
And I think a big takeaway is that being a good bargainer isn't about being aggressive or pushy. It's about being informed, being respectful, and being confident in your ability to communicate what you want. So here's a little something for you to think about as we wrap things up. Think about a recent purchase you made. Could you have used any of these techniques or phrases to potentially get a better price? In what situations in your own life does bargaining feel natural, and when does it feel more challenging? And what kind of bargainer do you think you are, or what kind would you like to be?
We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Until next time, happy bargaining, everyone.